Over 5,000 years ago, highly developed cultures such as Tiahuanaco, Coral Supe, Chimu, and many more flourished in the land known today as Peru. In these developed cultures, elites possessed great knowledge which, as they said, had been inherited from the gods. These elites were almost considered demigods in that they were the ones to teach the techniques to people, make beautiful textiles, and more. Between each culture, some stood out in engineering, others in medicine and surgery, and even some in astronomy. But beyond each of their strengths, each tribe taught about the mysteries of humankind, the world, and the universe. Around this time period, there was chaos all around the Incan tribes. Seeing this, Inti, the sun god, sent two of his children, Manco Capac and Mama Acolo, a man and woman, to the Andes to populate and control all nations under the sun god's laws. Manco Capac taught the leaders and men of the community that the Incan nation would stand out as long as they were wiser, more austere, and braver than the common people. He said, subjects need to be educated, as they need to see, admire, and obey superior men. Also, he warned that they had to be prepared for war. The girl Inti sent to Peru taught women how to spin wool, to prepare food, and to cure certain diseases. Mama Aklo also taught the women that being a woman was very important because they would be the ones raising the children and training them in their homes. This education would further the Inca civilization. This development of the Incan civilization caused jealousy in other neighboring nations. They said, if we don't destroy the Incas now, they will grow and conquer us later in the future. The Chanco was one among many nations. They were a fearsome group of warriors, and as they were about to defeat the Incas, an Incan warrior, Kusi Yamaputu, saw stones the size of men. He said to the stones, "Dear brothers, what are you doing there silent? Stand up and fight for Cusco alongside your Akwi." These stones converted themselves to warriors and joined the Incan army, leading them to victory. Eventually, the Incan Empire grew larger and larger until they developed a distinguished culture, economy, and political system. The Incan Empire grew in the east of South America. They lived between the Andes Mountains, Amazon jungle, and the coastal desert. These lands provided great protection from invasions. Machu Picchu, one of the 7 wonders of the world, is the Inca's most well-known civilization today. Machu Picchu in Quechua, their language, means Old Mountain. This is not the name the native people gave it, it is merely another denomination, named by the local people. Machu Picchu was used by the Incas as an administrative, educational, political, and astronomical center. On the way up to Machu Picchu, there were around 7 paths with several military checkpoints which guarded the important site. Machu Picchu is about 200 times smaller than Cusco, the capital of Peru. There were 16 neighborhoods grouped in 2 areas of Machu Picchu. The upper area, dedicated to the sun, and the lower area, dedicated to the moon. The mountain behind Machu Picchu was used as a lookout to where people would run up and down the mountain to deliver information from the gods and to see if the Spanish were coming. The trails look something like this. From the lookout mountain, messengers were able to watch over Machu Picchu to see if any invaders were coming. In the middle of Machu Picchu, important temples were built to worship the gods. On the right side of Machu Picchu, below the terraces, the king lived. Out of these 172 buildings, there were houses, classrooms, workshops, and temples built entirely of enormous rocks. This is an Incan temple in Machu Picchu. If you look closely, the stones used in the temples were in much better shape and placed together a lot nicer so they could please the gods. When the Incas built their own houses, they did not build it as well as they built their temples. There are slight gaps between the walls on their houses, while the temple walls had stones that were shaped perfectly to fit next to each other.
Quito, Ecuador. Here in the grasslands of South America are the remnants of the great Incan road. The sophisticated network of pathways and trails covers over 25,000 miles through Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile. The Inca built this vast roadway without the use of the wheel, draft animals, metal tools, or even a written language. Yet modern engineers have noted that the roadway incorporates advanced engineering principles.
The Inca road system was really one of the most magnificent ancient architectural feats ever made. One of the things that made the Inca roads so incredible is that they traversed the Andes, these incredibly tall, steep mountains. They had to bore tunnels through mountains. They cut narrow paths along sheer cliff faces.
One of the most intriguing things about the Inca road system is that there is a major artery that goes from the northwest to the southeast. And along that, we find almost every major megalithic construction, including Tiwanaku, Pumapunku, Cusco, Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, and Sacsayhuaman. Many are starting to believe that these megalithic structures are thousands of years older than the Inca, and therefore parts of the Inca road system are as well thousands of years older than that civilization.
The Incas, so many of their great structures, Cusco and their royal highway, you ask them who built these, how did you build these? And they'll say, we didn't build these. Well, who did build it?
The Incas had elaborate legends of coming through tunnel systems in the earth, appearing on an island in Lake Titicaca, and then coming to Cusco and finding already a system of tunnels and ancient mines and structures. It was the home of the gods, where they lived before they left.
The Incas believed in three worlds: the Kan, the Quilla, and the Wiracocha, which means the heavens, earth, and the underground world. Wiracocha is the god who thought and built the universe, called Tezcuini. The universe is alive and expands within Wiracocha. The sun was the main deity after Wiracocha.
The Inca and their ancestors stood in awe of the power of nature. In addition to Inti, the sun god, they worshipped the mountains, the earth, thunder, and the moon. They expanded their pantheon with each new people they conquered, incorporating new idols and spirits as their own. But all people of the region agreed on one universal creator called Viracocha. As the Inca left no written record, we know their gods as we know much of Indian life from chronicles of the Spaniards. Pedro de Cieza de Leon arrived in 1535.
The Indians say that for many days the world was in darkness, and then there emerged from the island of Titicaca the sun in its splendor, at which all rejoiced, and there came a man, large of stature, who had great powers. They called him Father of the Sun.
Just as Viracocha was the father of the sun, so each Inca leader was the son of the sun.
The Incas believed in three worlds: the Hanapacha, heavens, the Quepacha, and the Uchipacha. The Hanapacha was where the gods and the souls of human beings who became gods through their own effort lived. It was destiny for humans to become gods after death. Quepacha is the earth where humans live. Life was seen as a long trip, an odyssey to return or reunite with our origin and end god. Ukapacha is the underground world, where Huari dwells, and where the souls of humans rest after death, waiting for their next opportunity to live, continuing on the return trip to God. To please the gods, the Incas had 3 different important sacrificial animals: the condor, of highest importance, the puma, and the snake. The condor is of highest importance to sacrifice because it is a solar symbol. This is a bird that lives in high places and is a messenger of the gods. Nowadays, there are only a few condors left. It is believed that they are going extinct because the people are not listening to the gods anymore. The puma symbolizes the inner forces of Mother Earth, and the snake represents Mother Earth's secrets because it lived and roamed close to the earth. Everything comes from Mother Earth, so it is very important. She gives us shelter in her entrails and bears us in her womb, so that we may be born again and fulfill our destiny. Although, when most people think of the Incas, they immediately think of human sacrifice. However, it was actually not as common as most people think. Human sacrifices were only practiced during summer and winter solstice. Children were always chosen to be sacrificed because they were the most pure. The kids were chosen when they were only a couple months old. This was a huge honor to the parents if their child was chosen, but not so much for the kids.
They were discovered back in 1999 on the top of a very high volcano, about 6,000 metres high, so it's obviously very cold up there. And there were 3 bodies found, a 13-year-old girl and 2 younger children too, one a 4-year-old boy, another 5-year-old girl. So quite a macabre discovery though, because they were the victims of child sacrifice, a practice that was quite common during the Inca time.
So these extensive tests have been done on them. What did they show, these tests?
Well, they were actually looking at their hair, because your hair can actually tell you quite a lot about the sorts of foods and drinks you've been ingesting. And basically they found out all 3 children had been given large quantities of alcohol, a type of beer brewed from maize, and also coca leaves, so this is from which cocaine's extracted. So they were effectively given drugs and alcohol. Now the teenage girl was quite interesting. She was 13 years old and valued probably a bit more highly than the younger children because she was prepubescent, treated as a virgin, so she was obviously something more important to sacrifice than the younger children. And they found from her hair that she had very high levels of coca about a year before her death. And this probably ties in with the time she was selected from sacrifice. So she was plucked from a village, which is probably a peasant, and then prepared for this horrible demise.
And do we know more about how the tests were actually done? They just analysed the hair strands?
Yeah, so it's amazing. I mean, it's like they're just using analytical forensic techniques that we use now, and you can actually just see the chemicals that are in the hair. They're quite straightforward tests in a way. What's amazing is the chemicals are still there 500 years later. They also found that the teenage girl had been given a really, really large dose of alcohol in the last few weeks up to her death. And this probably means she was quite heavily sedated. So, I mean, it really is gruesome. She'd have been drugged, given large quantities of alcohol, taken all the way up to the top of this mountain, put in a shrine, and then left to die. And she died peacefully, I mean, as peacefully as you can if you've been sacrificed. She wasn't hit or anything like that, but would have passed away from the cold and the drugs.
And we should also remember, actually, for many families, this was a great honour as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is right. I mean, I wouldn't have been too happy myself if this had happened, but for some families, that's true.
The Incan society could not conceive life without God, so they built their gods a special place where heaven became one with the earth. In the construction of the temples, Inca used the best, most resistant materials because they had to last for thousands of years. Sometimes these walls even were covered in gold and silver. It was believed that the gold was the sun's god's blood and the silver was the moon's tears that got transformed inside the ground. Education in the Incan society was of high importance. The teachers were priests and priestesses because knowledge and ignorance were the root of all good and evil. The education system was very demanding and reserved for the members of the nobility, as they were being educated to rule over their people. Education did not consider women as superior to men, so they were not educated together. Boys studied at the yaque, Huasi until the age of 16. Boys were then put into a ceremony called the Huarachi. This was where boys would fight. This frequently led to the death of one of the boys because there was no space for the weak. The woman went through a series of schools. Work was performed in groups where there was healthy competition with joy, singing, and joking. Laziness was extremely looked down upon. If one person needed to build their house, the whole village would help out, saying, "Today for you, tomorrow for me." A popular phrase among people was, "He who doesn't work doesn't eat, and whoever doesn't contribute to the honeycomb doesn't get to taste the honey." There was no slavery, struggle between social classes, or exploitation of the human being, since work was not merchandise, but rather a way to put oneself in harmony with the universe, in which all beings, including the gods, work. The Inca's social structure was one of a hierarchy, in which the Inca leader was in charge. The priest was next because he was able to speak directly to the gods. The family of the Inca was next. They had a lot of control over the government. Next was the noble class, who were directly related to the people who found the city of Cusco. They lived luxurious lives and held powerful places in the government. The public administrators were next. They held places in the government that controlled the lower peoples socially. The commoners were the lowest, consisting of the artisans and farmers.
After the discovery of the New World, the Spanish had, by the 1520s, settled in many Caribbean islands and established New Spain, which spread from Panama to central Mexico. It was from here that the Spanish heard news of a gold-rich territory to the south. This was the Incan Empire, an empire which had emerged in the 15th century when the Kingdom of Cusco conquered their neighbouring kingdoms. 3 expeditions to discover the land were launched from 1522 to 1526, but they didn't make it further south in the coast of Ecuador. However, Francisco Pizarro, the leader of 2 of these expeditions, did enter Incan territory and brought smallpox to the region. Undeterred by his failures, Pizarro travelled to Spain with llamas, natives and gold, and convinced King Charles I to authorize another expedition. He returned to Panama with 180 men, including his brothers, and in 1531 landed near Tumbes, and it was here that he learned that the Incan Empire was in a chaotic state. Since his last expedition, Emperor Huayna Capac and his eldest son had both caught smallpox and died. So the emperor's other sons, both struggling for power, brought the empire into civil war. Nevertheless, Pizarro waited until reinforcements led by Hernando de Soto arrived before travelling south in May 1532. Meanwhile, in the Incan Civil War, Atahualpa had emerged victorious in battle over his brother in the city of Cajamarca. So the Spanish turned inland and travelled to meet the emperor with their remaining 168 men, 12 arquebuses and 4 cannons. On the 16th of November, Atahualpa, who was staying in camp outside the city, left most of his army outside as he entered with around 7,000 unarmed men to meet Pizarro. Pizarro, on the other hand, intended to capture the emperor like Cortes did in Mexico, so had positioned troops for an ambush and sent a friar to meet the emperor. The emperor reportedly refused to convert to Christianity and threw the holy book to the ground. This is when the order to attack was given and Spanish cavalry and guns slaughtered around 2,000 of the Incas while the emperor was taken prisoner. The well-armed and experienced fighters outside the city, who outnumbered the Spanish by about 400 to 1, fled in panic. With Atahualpa as prisoner, the Spanish ordered a large amount of gold to pay his ransom, so large that it took months for it to be supplied. Atahualpa, however, was still able to govern his empire to some extent. For instance, he ordered that his rival brother Huascar be killed, allowing his own generals to take Cusco, the most important city in the empire. In the spring of 1533, the Incas had met the Spanish demands, and the Spanish began dividing gold amongst themselves. Regardless, due to rumours, they executed Atahualpa in August. Then, to appease the Incans and gain support, they promised to appoint his younger brother, Manco Inca Yupanqui, as puppet emperor. With more reinforcements, the conquistadors marched on Cusco. En route, they gained the support of thousands of natives who lived unhappily under Incan rule, and together they took the city of November. Elsewhere, 2 great Incan generals were killed in quick succession. Quizquiz, who fled Cusco, was killed by his own mutinous soldiers, and Ruminahue, who led a rebellion in the north, was killed by the Spanish. So, with no leaders for the rebellions and a new puppet emperor, New Castile was established and Lima was founded as its capital. But Conquistador Diego de Almagro, who had been promised land in the south, led hundreds of troops to Chile hoping to establish New Toledo. So, the Emperor Manco Inca, who had been poorly treated by the Spanish, used this opportunity to flee Cusco and launch his own rebellion in 1536. He gathered over 100,000 troops and laid siege to the city. The Spanish and their native allies held out for 10 months and were only rescued by Almagro, who had returned from his failed expedition in Chile. Manco Inca fled into the mountains and set up a new state in Vilcabamba. However, when Almagro broke the siege, he used the opportunity to push for power and imprisoned two of Francisco Pizarro's brothers, thus starting a civil war between the Pizarros and Almagros. Almagro was killed in 1538, Francisco Pizarro in 1541, and Almagro's son in 1542. But before Pizarro died, he granted Pedro de Valdivia the right to conquer modern-day Chile. He succeeded where Almagro failed and expanded Spanish territory in South America. To end the infighting amongst the conquistadors, the Spanish government set up the Viceroyalty of Peru, sent in new governors, and introduced the new laws aimed at limiting the exploitation of the locals. This only prompted Gonzalo Pizarro, Francisco's brother, to rebel against the Spanish government, but he too was killed in 1546, ending the rebellions in Peru. In the following decades, the Spanish continued to expand their holdings in South America, but the Incas still ruled in Vilcabamba, and it wasn't until Francisco de Toledo was appointed viceroy over 2 decades later that the Spanish really challenged their position. In 1572, Toledo's armies marched into Vilcabamba, captured the emperor Tupac Amaru, and had him executed, ending the Incan Empire forever.
In conclusion, the Inca civilization was only in existence around 200 years. The Inca Empire grew quickly to become one of the world's most powerful civilizations due to their political, economic, and social systems. As the Spanish took control of South America, they not only brought disease that killed 99% of the Incan population, but they also used sophisticated iron weaponry that was no match for the Incas. While visiting the Incan ruins today, it is astonishing to experience the Incas' way of life as it was 600 years ago.